Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in like 1 minute. I want to make sure that people who are coming from another session have a chance to join. But I will say that I have put my email address and my website address in the chat box. So in case somebody has a question that we don't have time for today, you can absolutely reach out to me by email. There's also a form on my website where you can leave a comment or a question. And I want to also say at the outset that I'm going to be talking specifically about strategies for increasing happiness. So if anybody wants a copy of these strategies, I can send you the list very, very quickly by email. So you don't have to take notes. I'm not going to be presenting a PowerPoint, et cetera. But I would love to share any information that will be helpful to people, as you're thinking about it. So I'm just giving another like 30 seconds because I think people are still joining. But again, my email is in the chat room. Questions are open. So certainly you can start with a question, et cetera. And by the way, if anybody wants to share where they're listening from, I'd love to get a sense of who all is together to make this more like a class that I'm used to in terms of my teaching. And I am talking from Western Mass, where it is like very hot today. And it frankly looks like it's about to pour. So let's hope that my internet connection stays well. And boy, I love where everybody is from. A lot of people from San Diego. I'm recognizing some of those names. I really wish I was in Spain. My son spent 2 months last summer in Madrid and had a wonderful time. Canada, boy, a lot of people from California and Philadelphia. I've got a son living in Philadelphia right now. Somebody from Honolulu, boy. I am thinking about Hawaii these days. So I hope that you all are all staying safe. I know that it's been just a really difficult week there. So again, all right. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you're just joining us, welcome. I'm Catherine Sanderson, professor of psychology at Amherst College, and I love talking about the science of happiness. I've put my email and website address in the chat room. And if you're just joining us, maybe just put where you're listening from so that we're all sort of like together here. I'm planning on talking for about 15 minutes. And what I'm doing is top 10 strategies based in empirical, nerdy scientific research for increasing happiness. And then I'm going to turn it over to questions because Q&A is frankly always my favorite part of talking about psychology because psychology is everywhere. And here's my goal. I'll just say at the outset, my goal is number one, that everyone learns something new that they didn't know before listening today. Two, my goal is that you enjoy this experience. Again, that it's enjoyable, it's lively. But three, here's my big goal. My big goal is that everyone listening right now leaves with 2 or 3 things that you can use and implement in your life moving forward. Because here's the reality. We all benefit from living in a world with more happiness. And that's why I love talking, writing, teaching, speaking about happiness in all different forms. So thank you all so much for joining me and throwing in where everyone's from. I'm going to kind of go through and pour that over when we get to the Q&A soon. All right, so I'm giving you my top 10, again, all empirically based strategies for finding more happiness. One, lots of research suggests that there are pretty simple behaviors that we can engage in our daily lives that are empirically associated with happiness. And a lot of these are really easy. So one, exercise. Now, you probably already know that, and lots of people listening are like, yeah, I already exercise. I know that. So I'm going to kind of skip over that one, although exercise is really important. But here's another one, a behavior that we often don't think about, and that is sleep. So if I'm doing this talk in a big room and I say, who exercises? Many, many people will raise their hands. And then if I say, who gets enough sleep? There'll be like a smattering of a couple of different hands, not many, because here's the reality. Many people prioritize exercising and they don't prioritize getting enough sleep. But what the research tells us is that people who get enough sleep actually are happier and healthier. And as I often say, sleeping, it's actually easier than exercise. So if you don't get enough sleep, that would be a good one to try. Another key behavior that we know of is meditating. And maybe there's some people here who are already meditating, who are already knowing that strategy. But that is, again, there's lots of evidence suggesting that meditation is really good for happiness, also really good for health. There's really interesting research being done at Mass General in Boston showing that meditation actually changes a part of your brain that makes you kinder, that makes you nicer. So again, meditation seems to have lots of different benefits. Okay, so strategy one, if you're just joining us, change your behavior. And the three things that I kind of highlighted were exercise, sleep, meditation. So that's number one. Number two, find your match. And the find your match one is really based in research showing that we do our best work and we feel happiest when we are in an environment in which our own particular skills, talents, abilities can be put to good use. So there's a famous quote from a graduation speech at Stanford by Steve Jobs, which was, the only way to do great work is to love what you do. And in fact, that's what the research bears out. You can probably tell from listening to me right now that I love talking about psychology. I'm super nerd. So I find talking, reading, writing about psychology the best. And it's one of the reasons why I feel like I have the best job in the world. Professor, teacher about psychology. What's not to like? The grading would be what I don't like, but I like the teaching of it. But it's also really important to find your match at a personal level. There's a wonderful scale in psychology that's called the sensation seeking scale. And basically, the scale measures the extent to which you feel happiest and most alive under conditions of high levels of physiological arousal. Some people love that feeling. This is like, heart beating fast, rapid breathing, et cetera. And other people hate that feeling. Again, I don't like that feeling. Think about it, people who love going on roller coasters versus not. So here's what the research shows. If you are a person who loves that feeling of high level of arousal, then you're happiest in conditions in which you can meet those needs. So conditions of going on adventure travel, doing new things, roller coasters, bungee jumping, skydiving, whatever. Again, ways that create that physiological arousal. Other people, they do not like that arousal. They, in fact, find that arousal unpleasant. And so they actually benefit from being in a situation in which there's less physiological arousal. So things that are more predictable. The example I often give is staying in a luxury hotel versus camping. Those are different experiences. I also say to my husband, your camping wife is your second wife, because I am not a camper. But again, the key finding here is not you should bungee jump or you should stay in a luxury hotel. The key finding here is you need to figure out what situations make you happy and spend more time in those situations. So that's point number two. And I'm going to actually just throw out a little note here. I see a comment from Jonathan is that sleeping is simply not always easier than exercising. Hey, I will totally agree with that. I am a horrible sleeper. And that's a wonderful point. So again, the key here is finding the strategies that work for you. For people who are not good sleepers, actually finding some strategies for improving your sleep is a good way to do that. And there's, in fact, lots of empirical research showing how we can improve our sleep. So again, I'm given 10, hoping that everyone's going to find a couple that speaks to them. All right. So one, engage in particular behaviors. Two, find your match. Three, spend time in nature. What the research shows is that spending time in some kind of nature is beneficial for happiness, also beneficial for health. And the wonderful thing about this one is that lots of different things count. This could actually be, hiking, going for a walk in a forest or a park, even within an urban setting. But it can also be looking at blue spaces. There's really interesting research, and I actually have a piece on Medium about this on my Medium page that looks at the power of oceans, lakes, rivers, ponds. There seems to be something particularly beneficial about blue space. But it's also the case that even looking at nature when you're inside is beneficial. So this could be looking at nature through a window. It could be having house plants, et cetera, that all of those things are also really beneficial. So again, spending time in nature, good for happiness, good for health. And thank you, Harris, for putting that link in about the blue spaces benefits. Again, for people who want to read sort of more about what the research shows, which is really interesting. 4, express gratitude. And this is something that is extraordinarily important because I think many of us spend a lot of time sort of thinking about the problems we're facing. In fact, as a comment noted earlier, sometimes, sleeping isn't easy. One of the reasons why sleeping cannot be easy is that some of us, and I do this, go to sleep at night thinking about the problems they're facing. What's on your to-do list? What are the issues you have? What are things that are not resolved? And, that's really not good for good sleep, shockingly enough. And so one of the key findings from research, and I think I also have a piece on Medium about this, is that focusing on what you are grateful for in your life is really beneficial. And this could be what you're grateful for in your life right now. That's what's essential. So it's not, oh, here's what I'm going to be grateful for once I win the lottery, once I retire, once I move to Florida, whatever. This is, what are you grateful for in your life right now? There's really interesting research that looks at people who simply keep a gratitude journal, write down 2 or 3 things they're grateful for in their life, right before they go to bed at night or first thing when they wake up in the morning. Some people have a practice of like a gratitude jar. They, write things down and they put it in a jar, and, once a week or once a month, they read through the things in their life that they're grateful for. Any of those practices of focusing on what is good in your life right now are really, really beneficial in terms of happiness. And the reality is, lots of us tend to focus more on the bad in our lives as opposed to the good in our lives. So establishing a gratitude practice is a wonderful sort of lifelong habit to be focused on. And I see that sort of is resonating with a number of people here. And that's great. 5, and this is one of my favorites. And that is, make a gratitude visit. And this is an idea, I'm giving full credit, that comes from a professor at Penn, Martin Seligman. Some of you may have heard of him, really famous psychologist. And Dr. Seligman has a suggestion that he actually uses in his teaching. And it is that he has students think about someone who changed and shaped the nature of their life in some fundamental way. Could be a mentor, could be a teacher, could be a neighbor, could be a family member, but somebody who really played a role in shaping who you became. And that's a wonderful strategy for really thinking about what role somebody has played in your life that you are grateful for. But he does one step more. He has people write a letter to that person saying, hey, I don't know if you knew this, but you played this role in my life, and actually writing them a letter and then sending that letter to them, or traveling to them, standing in front of them and reading the letter aloud. And as you can imagine, that is a wonderful, rewarding thing for the person who's hearing the letter and for the person who's reading the letter. And what I think is so important to remember about this one is that most of us tell people what they meant to us in a eulogy. We do it when it's kind of like too late for them to hear it and appreciate and enjoy it. So what's so important about this write a gratitude letter strategy is that it really is focused on the here and now and really expressing to people the role that they played in your life. And I want to not go on too much longer, but I have a story. If we have time in Q&A, somebody asked me, because I have a story about a gratitude visit that I didn't make that I should have. So I'm just going to put a pin on that. Okay, 6. I want to make sure I leave time for Q&A. Smile. Smile. The mere act of smiling actually makes you feel happier. And what I think is so interesting about this one is that smiling makes you feel better, in part because it probably changes how people react to you. If you smile, other people may respond to you. That happiness is contagious. And so part of the act of smiling is it may mean that other people smile back, and you sort of create this positive feedback loop. There's also really interesting research that's been done, having people smile, not think of something funny, just make a smile. And then they put their hand in a bucket of freezing cold ice water. And what they have found is that the mere act of smiling actually changes how your body responds to pain. So that's, again, a really interesting idea that the mere act of smiling, in fact, may make you feel better. So smile. Again, this is the fake it till you make it idea. That's 6. 7. I've only got 10. 7. Give. Anything to anyone. And what I love about this one is that, yes, basically anything counts. People who donate to charity, higher levels of happiness. People who volunteer in their community, higher levels of happiness, also better health. People who donate blood or bone marrow, higher levels of happiness. So what's so important about this one is that giving, broadly construed, is beneficial. There's fascinating research using fMRI data, again, looking at patterns of brain activation, that shows that if you just think about giving a gift to a friend, it actually activates a part of the brain that is in charge of processing rewarding experiences. The exact same part of your brain that is activated when you eat chocolate. Also when you use cocaine, but that's like a less, like good piece of advice here. All right, so 7 is give. 8, spend money wisely. We've all heard about the link between money and happiness, and that's, sort of one of the, common beliefs that people hold. More money will bring more happiness. There's actually some data suggesting that that, in fact, is true, probably because having more money reduces stress. When your car breaks down and you don't have enough money to buy a new car, it's much more stressful than if you're like, wow, this is inconvenient, but I'm going to buy a new car. I'm going to rent a car while my car's in the shop or whatever. But the data is also very strong that how you spend money is really important. And what the research would suggest is that spending money in 2 distinct ways actually predicts more happiness. One, spending money on experiences is better than spending money on belongings. And so this could be spending money on, seeing Taylor Swift, or, going to Greece, or going to a Broadway play, or, whatever, having a weekend at a spa, whatever it is. Spending money on experiences lets you anticipate the experience the experience, and then reflect back on the experience. So all of those experiences are really beneficial in a way that if you, buy a new watch, purse, etc., initially it's exciting, and then it's just your, watch, car, purse, whatever. You adapt to it. Research also really interestingly shows that spending money in ways that match your personality is also beneficial. So if you're extroverted, spending money, going out to a bar with friends is more enjoyable than if you're introverted. If you're introverted, spending money, going to a bookstore and buying books might be more enjoyable. So again, this kind of relates to the point I made number 2, which is find your match. But different people find happiness in spending money in different ways, which I think is really interesting. 9, avoid comparisons. There's a famous quote from Teddy Roosevelt: comparison is the thief of joy. And the reality is many of us feel really great about our own lives right up until when we start comparing our lives to those of other people around us. Oh, that person has, more friends, more successful children, better job, better travel, better, whatever. And so one of the challenges is that comparison can make us feel worse about our own lives. And this is something I think for many of us who spend time on social media, that can really kind of accentuate it. That on social media, everybody kind of looks like they're thriving, even if internally they're not feeling that great. So if you know that spending time on social media brings you down, avoid it, or remind yourself social media is not an autobiographical rendition of people's lives. It's what they're choosing to share. And most people share mostly the good on social media. Finally, last but not least, in fact, not least at all, because it's what I'm, ending with, and that is number 1 best predictor of happiness: build and maintain relationships. The quality of our relationships is the single best predictor of happiness. And what's really important to remember here is that number 1, it doesn't matter the label on the relationship. So this isn't you have to have a spouse or you have to be a parent. It really is about the authenticity of the relationship. So you can have good relationships with romantic partners, with family members, with colleagues, with friends. It doesn't matter the label on the relationship. What matters is that you can be your authentic self. So you can share how you're really thinking and feeling. You can get support. That relationships are the single best predictor of our happiness. Now, the reality is also relationships take work. They take time, they take energy, they take effort, they take conflict, they take compromise. And so good relationships don't happen by magic, but they're the single best predictor of our happiness. All right, so I have shot through 10 strategies. I'm going to briefly repeat them now because I know that some people maybe joined a little bit late. I also put my email address and website address in the very beginning of the chat. If anybody wants a physical copy of these, I can just shoot you out a quick email, but I'm going to shoot through them and then I'm going to Q&A. So please, put your questions in the chat room, I think, or no, put your questions, in the Q&A, and I'm going to then turn and respond to them. Sorry. So here are the 10 though. Change your behavior. We talked about exercising, sleeping, meditating. Find your match personally and professionally. Spend time in nature. 4, express gratitude. 5, make a gratitude visit to someone else. 6, smile. 7, give anything to anyone. 8, spend money wisely. 9, avoid comparisons. And 10, build and maintain good relationships. All right. So in the remainder of our time, And I think we have about 10 minutes now. I want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time and the remaining sessions you're going to. I'm going to go through the Q&A, which I think you're supposed to put in the Q&A. So I'm going to start with that Q&A box, but then I will go back to the chat room because it's possible people have put some questions in the chat, and I will go to those next. So first question that I have is, and this is from Amanda, what are your thoughts on the difference between happiness and contentment? Love that question. Thank you. This is actually kind of like a heated debate within the literature of psychologists and behavioral economists. And basically what the research would show is that when we think about happiness, there's a component of pleasure. So there's the pleasure of like having a great piece of cheesecake, listening to a beautiful piece of music, looking at a beautiful piece of art. So there's that sense of pleasure. Then there's the sense of engagement. So this is really active engagement, being present in your life. And then 3, there's actually a sense of meaning. So are you doing things that you find meaningful? And so when we think about these differences, it actually is really important because sometimes how you measure happiness actually depends on, influences what the results are. Most of the research would say that feeling a sense of contentment, life satisfaction is really valuable, as is feeling a sense of meaning. That those are sort of the best predictors of happiness, as opposed to like moment to momentary like joy or pleasure. So great question. Thank you. Next question. How can external factors affect happiness? How can you be happy when you don't have money, job, reading it, money, job, or good relationships, or during war or natural calamities? So thank you so much for that question. That's a really timely and important question in lots of ways. So it certainly is the case that you need to have an adequate income, whether that's from a job or, from some other source, inheritance or, whatever, retirement savings, et cetera, in order to be happy. And that's mostly because having a lack of money is very, very stressful. And those are sort of like opposites things in terms of happiness. So having a sense of stability from having an adequate amount of income seems to be an important predictor of happiness. That's true. It's not the only predictor, but it does seem to allow us to basically make choices in our life that can give us the opportunity to find more happiness. It's also the case that having relationships is a really important part of happiness. But as I described before, this doesn't have to be marriage. It doesn't have to be being a parent. It doesn't have to be, whatever. What matters is the authenticity of the relationships. And what we know is that we can all work on building those relationships, even if we don't have them, right now or in the moment. During war or natural calamity, there's actually really interesting research showing that during times of natural disasters, people may form relationships. They may sort of have a sense of empathy and connection to other people. I have really wondered about what the data is going to show, which we'll get, I think, very soon, about what the coronavirus pandemic did in terms of people's happiness. Because on one hand, it was very, very stressful for lots of people. People lost loved ones, et cetera. It's also the case that there was a sense for many people of analyzing in their own lives the choices they were making. How am I spending my time? We've heard about the great resignation and people basically kind of saying like, hey, life is short. I don't know if I want to be doing this, and sort of rethinking their relationships, how they spent time. So it is also the case that during times of natural disasters, people may cling together. They may form new relationships. They may also develop skills in resilience that can actually pay off for them later on. So this doesn't mean that people may be happy in the moment, but it means that they may find a sense of meaning and purpose later on. Next question. Oh, and thank you. This is somebody said already digging this section. My question is challenging. There seems to be epidemic of people who are experiencing suicidal ideation and depression. How do those who live on the happier side of your life share your recommendations and ideas with people who are in dark spaces and honoring their personal situation? So thank you so much, Stan, for asking that question. I have a couple things to say about that. One, I want to really make clear that toxic positivity is not beneficial and that people are in very different places. So my session is really about how do we take people who are frankly like me, like here, not sort of naturally predisposed to be happy. I have a family history of bipolar disorder, of depression. I've lost a grandparent to suicide. So, this question, really hits near and dear to me. My session is about taking people who are kind of here and trying to like find sort of day moments that things you can do to structure your life to prioritize that will increase happiness. My session is not about people who are struggling with clinical disorders. So it's not as simple as to say people are struggling from depression or suicidal ideation. Volunteer, go for a walk, meditate, etc. For people who are struggling with clinical disorders, for mental health problems, getting actual help, including therapy, talk therapy, but also potentially including drug therapy, is really beneficial. And so for those of us who have people in our lives, and this is true, frankly, for many people, making sure those people have adequate support and connecting people with that support is really essential. What my talk is really focused on is trying to take people who could be a little bit happier. I saw a wonderful quote on social media the other day, which is, I don't have time to exercise, I make time to exercise. And for me, that's kind of the key, is that for many of us, life can get sort of overwhelming. And yet what we know is that we all have choices about how we spend minutes, hours, a day. And so prioritizing, hey, maybe I'm really busy and I got a lot of stuff going on and my house isn't as clean as I wish it was, but I'm going to really prioritize having dinner with friends. I'm going to really prioritize, going outside and walking for 30 minutes. I'm really going to prioritize, whatever it is. Making things a priority that we know increases happiness is just really important. So thank you for that question. All right. Can someone actually know they are happy in the moment, or must it always be an awareness that occurs by reflection? Ooh, good question. I'm kind of trying to think about how we would even analyze that, in that way. So I think that in the moment, we often think about a concept called flow. I teach a class in sports psychology, and we talk about flow a lot in sports psychology. And what you know about flow is that if you ask somebody, hey, are you in flow? That actually disrupts the experience of flow, right? That part of being in flow is things happening in an unconscious automatic moment and not really even being aware of time passing. So frankly, right now it is 3:57, and I feel like this session has flown by. I've been talking for 27 minutes. I had no idea that this was the case. And so one of the challenges is that interrupting people's moment-to-moment experience can actually disrupt their experience of happiness. And so in that way, we often sort of ask people to think back, what are times that you have been happy, as opposed to interrupting their experience of it in the moment. But we can all probably think about times in our life in which boy, I loved, going on that trip or seeing that movie, or for some people, maybe going on that run. That would not be me. In that way. Okay. Let's see. I'm still trying to go through, and I think I've answered everything in the Q&A. I've answered everything in the Q&A. I'm now going back to the chat. And let's see. I'm going to try to zipping through all of this. Let's see. Questions. Sorry about this. Good luck to those of you who are focused on houseplants. That's a gift I do not have. People have given really good advice about gratitude, and have shared some really important things in the chat room. And yeah, thanks for the kind words that people have said in various ways. And let's see. All right. Does the amount of relationships, I'm now at the bottom, does the amount of relationships matter? Can you have too few as opposed to many? It's really interesting research on this. I actually teach a seminar in close relationships. And here's what I'm going to throw out. The magic number seems to be about 6. 6 in terms of really close relationships. And I think that's because relationships take time and energy and effort, that you can't, be super close to 50 people, because you actually have to stay up to date on what is, going on in their lives. You have to share with them, et cetera. So that seems to be about the magic number. And I'm kind of going back in time. And let's see. Oh, sorry. I'm going to put my information in the chat again. So here it is. I know I'm out of time. Talk as fast as I can. So I'm putting my information in the chat again. So my email address is ca.sanderson@amherst.edu. My website is sandersonspeaking.com. You can watch a longer version of this on my website. And I'm also on Instagram @SandersonSpeaking, where I regularly talk about happiness and health. And of course, I'm on Medium, and I regularly talk about happiness and health. And most recently, I guess, actually hazing, which is not about happiness or health, but which is also important, and about psychology. So I know I'm out of time. This session is recorded. If you want to refer back to it, again, if you reach out to me by email or on my website, I'm glad to send you a link to the 10 strategies that I discussed in the interest of time. I just kind of shared about them briefly, but thank you all so much for listening. As I often say, more happiness in the world is good for us all. And if anyone wants to hear me speak again, in 30 minutes, I'm actually talking again about the psychology of courage and inaction. So it will be a different kind of a topic, but it will be me. And it will be me talking about psychology, and more psychology in the world is also good for us all. So thank you all so much for listening. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this topic, and I'm really thankful that you have chosen to spend a little bit of your weekend with me. Again, reach out anytime. Thank you so much for checking in. And I'll say one more thing. If anybody really wants to hear my thoughts, my book is called The Positive Shift. And in that book, I talk about the link between happiness and health and longevity, and give specific strategies we all can use. And it's available on independent bookstores, Amazon, Audible, if you want to hear me read it aloud. So again, thank you all so much. Have a very nice rest of your day. And maybe I'll see some of you again in 30 minutes or so. Take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye.